What happens when a voice once praised as a gift from heaven becomes the cry of a soul in turmoil? Luandria Johnson, the gospel powerhouse who rose from obscurity to Grammy-winning stardom, carried a voice so raw and electrifying it could move entire congregations to tears. But behind the pulpit and the stage lights, she wrestled with storms that no audience could see, storms that would eventually erupt in the most shocking way. On that fateful night, the woman fans once called anointed couldn't hold it together any longer. In front of a stunned crowd, Luandria's meltdown shattered the image of gospel perfection. Security rushed in, the audience froze between heartbreak and disbelief, and the industry was left questioning how a star so divinely gifted could fall so painfully from grace. This wasn't just a performance gone wrong, it was the public unraveling of a life caught between faith, fame, and unbearable demons. And what followed that night left the entire gospel community stunned. Luandria Johnson, the voice that once lifted broken souls and carried entire congregations to their feet, reached a breaking point so raw and public that it shook the very foundation of gospel music. This wasn't just a slip, a stumble, or another tabloid headline, it was an explosion of pain, pressure, and truth that forced everyone watching to question how much one woman could endure under the weight of her gift. The meltdown, the aftermath, and the storm of whispers that followed revealed a hidden battle far darker than anyone had imagined. Luandria, the unforgettable Season 3 winner of BET's Sunday Best, had always been celebrated for her honesty and unfiltered testimony. Fans loved her not just for her powerhouse voice, but because she never pretended to be perfect, she was real. Yet, during that fateful live performance, the same woman who once sang of redemption and resilience found herself unraveling before the very audience that once crowned her a queen. Something went terribly wrong that night, and the ripple effect continues to haunt both her legacy and the gospel world itself. During the middle of her performance, Luandria's emotions surged, resulting in an onstage breakdown so severe that security had to step in physically. Fans captured the entire incident on video. Within hours, the footage went viral, sparking discussions, splitting opinions, and raising significant questions about what was truly happening behind the scenes. Was this merely a case of stress, fatigue, or personal issues spilling into the public domain? Or is there a more profound narrative? One that exposes the pressures gospel artists endure, the heavy weights of fame, and the unseen struggles that even the most gifted voices contend with. In this video, we will reveal everything. What transpired that evening, the reactions from fans, the repercussions within the gospel community, and the reality of the challenges Luandria has faced in her past. And believe me, you will be astonished by the links between this breakdown and her long history of controversial incidents. By the conclusion of this analysis, you will grasp the larger context, and it might entirely alter your perception of one of gospel's most talented yet troubled stars. The evening commenced like any other concert. Fans filled the venue, eager to hear Luandria Johnson's voice, which many have hailed as one of the most anointed and soulful in gospel music. The atmosphere was electric, the band was ready, and when she first appeared on stage, the crowd erupted in applause. For years, people have praised Luandria, not just for her vocal strength, but for her authenticity. She is not the type of artist who conceals herself behind an image of perfection. She shares her truth, imperfections and all. And that is precisely what fans anticipated, an unforgettable evening of worship and sincerity. However, as the performance progressed, something began to feel off. Observers remember her starting off strong, delivering the opening songs with her characteristic fervor. However, her energy seemed to change by the third song. She seemed restless rather than riding the beat. Between songs, she began to pace the stage and spoke in a style that seemed more like unfiltered venting than testifying. While some people applauded her candor, others shifted uneasily, recognizing that this wasn't how a gospel concert usually went. Then the tipping point arrived. Luandria abruptly halted in the middle of her performance as the music grew louder. The band became silent. She took the microphone, clearly moved, and started speaking directly to the crowd. Her remarks were raw, brimming with vulnerability, frustration, and occasionally rage. She yelled, according to witnesses, about the strain she is under, the lack of support she experiences, and the burden of being continuously scrutinized by both church circles and admirers. The audience was unsure on how to respond. A few applauded, urging her to express her truth. Others watched in quiet as the moment unraveled, astonished. Then, things became even more heated. Leandria hurled herself to the edge of the stage, dropped her microphone, and threw off her jacket. At that point, security intervened. Videos are going viral on the internet. Guards are cautiously approaching her in an effort to prevent the situation from getting worse. She initially protested, shoving them away and requesting privacy. However, they were forced to remove her off stage as her agitation increased. The show was practically over, but the band tried to continue. Incredulous, the fans whispered to one another about what had just transpired. In a matter of hours, the video went viral on social media. On Instagram and Twitter, hashtags including Leandria's name began to trend. Asserting that she was just overwhelmed and in need of sympathy, other supporters hurried to her defense. Some were more critical, accusing her of being unprofessional and allowing her personal issues to interfere with a live performance. This is where most people were surprised, though. Leandria Johnson has already experienced public outbursts and moments of controversy. Actually, there have been times during her career when her unvarnished honesty has conflicted with the standards of the gospel community. And we must examine her past in order to truly see why this meltdown struck so strongly. Her ascent to stardom, her troubles with addiction, her disagreements with the church, and any personal issues that might have influenced what we witnessed on stage that evening. You have to go back to the beginning in order to truly comprehend the significance of what transpired on that stage. Leandria Johnson wasn't just another up-and-coming gospel performer. She was a force from the start. A voice that was unavoidable. A woman who experienced the highs, lows, and all in between while singing gospel music. She appeared in BET's Sunday Best, a reality competition show that aims to identify the next major gospel talent, in 2010. She was a single mother of 3 at the time and was having financial difficulties. She didn't arrive well-groomed or wearing the glitzy attire that many competitors attempted to wear. Her audition was actually the epitome of raw. Wearing torn pants and flip-flops, she arrived with a resolute yet worn-out spirit. But none of that mattered from the moment she opened her mouth. The judges couldn't believe it. It was impossible to ignore the authenticity, soul, and grit in her voice. She was singing more than simply the words. With each note, she was giving testimony. Fans nationwide felt as though they had not simply found a new gospel performer when she was awarded Sunday Best Season 3 champion. They had made a connection with someone who embodied the hardships of everyday existence in anointed sound. The industry quickly advanced her career after Sunday Best. The Awakening of Leandria Johnson, her first album, peaked at number 1 on the Billboard Gospel Albums chart. It's Going to Be All Right and Jesus become anthems for people facing their own storms. People were drawn to her because she was flawed and not afraid to own it, not because she was picture perfect. However, that openness went both ways. She was criticized because of the same thing that made others fall in love with her. Leandria never concealed her personal struggles. She talked candidly about her battle with drinking, her doubts about the hypocrisy she witnessed in the church, and the weight of being placed on a pedestal she never requested. Some characterized her as reckless, unprofessional, or even unworthy to bear the gospel banner, while others found her candor refreshing. Her notoriety turned into a double-edged sword at this point. Leandria shattered the trend in a society where gospel musicians are frequently expected to portray ideals like immaculate families, immaculate images, and unwavering faith. Behind the microphone, she showed the people the wounds, the scars, and the breakdowns. Gospel, to her, was not about projecting a flawless picture. It was about singing through the chaos of life and surviving. She developed a fervently devoted following as a result of her honesty. However, it caused a rift inside the gospel community as well. She was hailed by certain leaders as a vital voice for a new generation and evidence that God could use anyone, no matter how damaged. Others denounced her, claiming that her acts occasionally overshadowed her gift and that her transparency had gone too far into disorder. Throughout her career, she has been plagued by this tension. There was an implicit query in every performance, interview, and live stream. Would Leandria produce the acclaimed powerful performance that fans had come to expect? Or would others feel uneasy when her personal problems spilled onto the stage? Which brings up the meltdown again. She wasn't having a spontaneous breakdown when she stopped singing and began to vent to the crowd. It was a continuation of Leandria's long-standing refusal to conceal her struggles, even when they are in the public eye. The distinction this time is that security had to step in since the situation became so out of hand. This action turned the situation into a viral scandal that rekindled the discussion about whether her rawness is a strength or a weakness, rather than just another transparent narrative. Let's take a moment before delving into the more profound struggles she has encountered, though, as many people are unaware that Leandria has been battling demons that most fans have only seen in passing behind the glitter of the gospel industry, TV appearances, and award events. Her battles with addiction, suffering, and the price of celebrity are the subject of the following chapter. And believe me, the story becomes even more tragic and enlightening at this point. Any musician who has walked the tightrope of fame will frequently tell you that the cheers they receive on stage are just half the tale. Few people ever really comprehend the struggles that take on behind the scenes. And that reality has been brutally apparent to Leandria Johnson. One thing was evident from the start of Leandria's ascent to stardom. She would not play along. She refused to present herself as the refined church lady that so many people expected her to be. She talked candidly about her difficulties. She was self-aware. She allowed the world inside her most sensitive areas by doing this. However, there was a cost to such transparency. Leandria's fight with alcohol was one of her greatest struggles, and she never really made an effort to conceal it. Both detractors and admirers conjectured about her drinking for years. While some religious officials confronted her directly, others spoke behind closed doors. However, in typical Andrea way, she took the problem directly. She acknowledged using alcohol as a coping mechanism for stress, pain, and the crushing strain of celebrity in interviews and even while speaking. Nor was it merely a friendly battle. Videos and stories have shown her looking drunk in public places, including on stage. Those who believed she was defaming the gospel platform harshly criticized her when those moments went viral. Others, however, viewed her candor as a unique kind of honesty, while others were quick to pass judgment. Ultimately, how many gospel musicians are prepared to go the stage and declare, "Yes, I am anointed, but I am also broken"? She struggled with more than just drinking. Leandria also had to bear the burden of familial obligations. She frequently discussed the difficulties of juggling work and family as a mother of several children, particularly in a field that required a lot of her. Her pressure was exacerbated by the ongoing scrutiny, emotional tiredness, and financial difficulty. Then followed the public scandals that seemed to be chasing her everywhere. She vented about the hypocrisy she witnessed in the church in a webcast, which became one of her most notorious moments. She didn't mince words. She challenged the judgmental attitudes of churchgoers, called out pastors for leading double lifestyles, and even used language that startled many of her most loyal followers. Like wildfire, that live stream went viral. Within hours, her remarks were being debated by church leaders, YouTube channels, and gospel websites. Was she going too far, or was she expressing an uncomfortable truth? She also raised eyebrows when she acknowledged that she didn't always feel like attending church. Those remarks seemed like sacrilege to some. Others found them refreshing, a brutally honest admission of a sentiment that many Christians share but are too scared to express. But no matter how strong it is, honesty cannot take away suffering. Behind all of these headlines was a woman with unhealed wounds who was attempting to survive and understand her purpose in life. The flaws in the armor were visible to fans who had followed her trip. Her public breakdowns and outspoken statements served as further reminders that internal conflicts cannot be resolved by celebrity. The link to her onstage meltdown becomes extremely evident at this point. That night, we saw more than a haphazard disintegration. In front of thousands of people, years of suffering, stress, and unsolved issues were surfacing. Leandria's outburst and emotional outburst were not limited to that particular instance. It had to do with a pattern. A tendency to expect perfection from one person while putting more strain on them than they should. This is where things become even more complicated. Because very few individuals stop to ask the more profound question, even if the public was quick to share their ideas, remark, and pass judgment on social media. How does the gospel industry itself contribute to these conflicts? Are artists like Leandria truly being pushed to the limit by the demand to be praised, perfect, and inspirational all the time? The industry side of this story, the hidden demands of gospel music, the double standards that artists encounter, and why Leandria's breakdown could be a sign of a far larger issue that no one wants to discuss are all covered in the next section. And believe me, you'll see why this meltdown isn't simply Leandria's narrative once you see the wider picture. It serves as a warning to the whole gospel community. Record deals, celebrity culture, dazzling lights, and limitless chances for fame and fortune are typically the first things that spring to mind when someone mentions the music industry. The gospel industry, however, is different, or at least it should be. Gospel music has positioned itself as a ministry first and a business second for many years. Not all artists are singers. They are regarded as role models, messengers, and spiritual leaders. And although that expectation might seem admirable at first, it frequently turns into a crippling burden. Because gospel singers are evaluated on more than simply their vocal prowess or artistic flair, in contrast to secular performers. Their personal life, decisions, looks, and capacity to maintain a facade of moral and spiritual perfection are all used to evaluate them. Artists like Leandria Johnson are caught in the crossfire at precisely this point. Let's dissect this. The gospel community, in principle at least, celebrates genuineness. Songs concerning adversity, salvation, and God's grace are highly favored by fans. They want to be reminded that everyone needs mercy and that no one is flawless. However, those same followers frequently expect the artists who convey those messages to be flawless. There is limited opportunity for human error because of this contradiction. Perhaps the best illustration of this conflict is Leandria. She received accolades for her honest, unvarnished testimony as soon as she entered the public eye. She didn't fit the polished mold, thus people were drawn to her. Her honesty pulled people in, and she wasn't scared to acknowledge that she had been broken, that she had made mistakes, and that she was still learning. However, the affection became condemnation the instant her challenges breached boundaries that the public considered too nasty, such as drinking, swearing, or venting anger at the church. A situation like this is unachievable due to the double standard. Despite being human, gospel performers are not permitted to show their humanity in public. They are supposed to live up to a standard that even pastors and church leaders frequently fall short of, while yet providing faultless worship experiences on stage. And the consequences are severe when they make a mistake. Social media merely feeds the flames. If a gospel performer had a bad night in the past, the harm might have just affected those there. These days, millions of people record, share, and analyze every mistake in a matter of hours. One mispronounced word, one vulnerable moment, one emotional collapse. All of a sudden, it's popular on blogs and other platforms worldwide. Here's the most serious problem, though. The assistance that gospel singers sorely require is not often given by the industry itself. Resources for mental health are rarely given priority. There are seldom any safe places to discuss addiction, sadness, or exhaustion. Rather, the reaction tends to be one of humiliation and retribution. Artists who cross boundaries run the risk of being blacklisted, losing their jobs, or being declared unfit for ministry. The hypocrisy becomes evident at this point. Because many of the same church leaders and industry leaders who are loudly condemning musicians are also keeping their own problems hidden. The difference is their secrets do not get live-reamed, recorded, or blasted throughout the internet. Leandria herself has pointed this out in the Beyond, calling out church leaders for their double lives and their unwillingness to address their personal issues with the identical transparency she's proven. And permits now not forget about the economic aspect of the enterprise. Even as secular artists often have get right of entry to large contracts, royalties, and financial protection nets, gospel artists frequently face a lot tighter margins. For plenty, the strain to hold running, even when they're mentally or emotionally unwell, comes from the very real want to offer for his or her families. Cancelling indicates, taking prolonged breaks, or stepping away to heal certainly isn't an alternative if it approach losing income. So, what do artists do? They push themselves beyond their limits, covering their struggles until the mask eventually cracks beneath the pressure. This is the larger photograph at the back of Leandria's meltdown. It wasn't just about one night or one performance long past incorrect. It was the end result of years of being caught in an enterprise that demands perfection whilst imparting very little grace whilst imperfection unavoidably shows up. And in lots of approaches, her story is a mirror held as much as the entire gospel world, forcing us to invite a few uncomfortable questions. Why do we declare to rejoice honesty but punish people who live surely? Why do we sing approximately grace but withhold it from the very artists who supply the one songs to us? And why is the church regularly faster to rip down its wounded than to provide them the assist they want to heal? The fact is Leandria's meltdown is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a gadget that didn't create a sustainable area for artists to thrive as each musicians and people. And until something modifications, she won't be the closing gospel star to find herself at a breaking factor in the front of a live audience. But right here's wherein matters get even more compelling. Due to the fact at the same time as many in the Church International criticized Leandria, others, fans, fellow artists, or even a few leaders rallied round her. They noticed her not as a disgrace, however as a mirrored image in their own hidden struggles. And that reaction fame is something effective approximately in which the gospel network is probably headed.